A very good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kulla Krishna Madhavi, and today we'll be walking through Block 2 International Marketing Mix. In that, we'll be looking at the first unit, Unit 4, that is International Product Planning and Pricing. So, before we go into the actual unit, I wanted to give a broad overview of what this block relates to. So, this block, that is International Marketing Mix, talks in terms of four elements of marketing mix, that is product price, place, and promotion. Place is also called as distribution. So, when we're looking at the first unit, it explains the concept of product and product standardization, product adaptation, the theory of international product life cycle, and its marketing applications. So, let us jump in to Unit 4 International Product Planning and Pricing. So, when we are looking at this chapter, the first thing is in terms of the objectives, it covers factors like meaning of product and product standardization and product adaptation, the theory of international product life cycle and its marketing applications. We'll also be looking at strategic significance of branding and packaging, describing the pricing decisions in an international context, evaluating the various factors that can affect price, like foreign exchange rate, dumping, etc., and explain the pricing terms and international quotations with a review of payment methods. So, further, let us look in terms of the structure. The structure broadly follows the pattern of introduction, the definition, new product development, product adoption. We'll also be looking at the theory of international product life cycle, product standardization versus product adaptation. This is a very interesting topic that we'll be covering along this whole session. Branding decisions, packaging, functions and criteria, the role of price dumping, price distortion, transfer pricing, counter trade, price quotations, and so on and so forth. This is a very interesting topic. At the same time, it is very all encompassing. So let's go further. So, in terms of understanding broadly what this topic is all about, so what we need to understand fundamentally is that just because a product is successful in one country, there's no guarantee that it will be successful in other markets as well. So, a marketer must always determine local needs and tastes. So, that means that we need to understand the customer in their own locality and consider that in terms of our product. Some products may have universal appeal. If you were to look at, say, Coca Cola or Pepsi for that matter, we can say to a broad extent it has a universal appeal. There's not much change in the basic product. Of course, there are multiple variants in each country that we visit. And it's customized to that, but the broad formula for, say, a Coca Cola or Pepsi remains the same. So, not much changes are required in the base product. There can be variants. However, in most cases, we'll also find that there are very few products that have a very broad appeal. They may require certain amount of modification, both in terms of the product or other features to achieve acceptance in the local marketplace. So the principle that we need to understand here is that though it is based in domestic marketing, it also has to be expanded to international marketing. So let us first look in terms of what is definition of product. So when you talk about a product, all basic product concepts are fully applicable to global marketing as just as they are applicable to the domestic market or local market. Broadly, a product can be defined in terms of its tangible physical attributes. Now, these are the three keywords: tangible physical attributes such as weight, dimensions, and materials. So, when you're talking in terms of an automobile, what do? We say it's 3,000 pounds of metal or plastic measuring 190 inches long, 75 inches wide, and 59 feet, 59 inches high. So, any description which is limited to the physical attributes, however, will give an incomplete account of the benefits that a product can provide. So, what we need to understand is if we are talking in terms of an automobile, at a very minimum, car buyers expect an automobile to provide other features which are actually more tangible, like they may not be physically, touchable or physically tangible in terms of any of our senses, but in terms of the kind of value add that it gives, they are very very critical. So for a car, factors like safety, comfortable transportation, they are all derived from the physical features. So, if the physical feature of a car has airbags and adjustable seats, we know that automatically airbags will save a person when there a certain amount of cushioning that it is providing in case of any accident or major impact. Adjustable seats, which can help us to adjust driving according to our height, length, and seating comfort, etc. So, marketers cannot ignore status, mystique, and other intangible product attributes that a particular model of automobile may provide. So, these are the intangible product attributes, but if we also understand that these intangible product attributes are largely derived from the physical, tangible attributes. So, a number of markets may be developed around these intangible attributes as well. So, if we broadly define a product, now we need to understand that it has to be redefined as a collection of physical, psychological, service, and symbolic attributes that collectively yield satisfaction or benefits to a buyer or user. So, it is not one dimensional, uh, it has to consider all these factors. And also, when you're talking of one dimensional, it's not just physical attributes, but consists of four types of attitude, that is physical, psychological, service, and symbolic attributes. So, in terms of new product development, we need to consider six distinct steps. So, what are these six distinct steps? The first step is the generation of new product ideas. Such ideas can come from any number of sources, that is, salespersons, employees, competitors, government, marketing research firms, customers, etc. That means both internal and external sources of information. Now, the second step involves the screening of ideas. So, while the first step involves the generation of ideas, the second step involves the screening of ideas. So, ideas must be acknowledged and reviewed, both in terms of its feasibility and as an understanding of what the customer requires in the target or host country. So, the product has to be screened accordingly. So, there are certain products which may not fit into the country that we are looking at. For example, if you are looking in terms of say refrigerators, now if the country is very cold, now we need to understand if refrigerators are going to work well for them, or similarly, will air conditioning be the right application for them, or are we looking at centralized AC, or are we looking at heaters in that particular country? So accordingly we need to modify the product. So the third step is business analysis. So, understanding and estimation of the product features, cost, demand, and profit. The fourth step is the actual product development. So, this comes in the fourth step. It involves lab and technical tests and manufacturing some pilot models in small quantities in a trial version. And at this stage, the product is more or less handmade because it does not make sense to invest in large scale machinery or any specialized machinery for that matter. Then the fifth step involves test marketing to determine potential marketing problems and the optimal marketing mix. And finally, if all works well, then the company may decide to go for a full scale commercialization of that particular product. So that means that there is going to be certain full scale production and marketing. In terms of product adoption, the most important thing to understand is that when we are entering into a foreign market, marketers should consider factors that influence product adoption. So, here we need to understand diffusion theory. So, if we understand diffusion theory, we understand that there are at least six factors that have a bearing on the adoption process. That is relative advantage, compatibility, trialability, divisibility, observability, complexity, and finally the price. So all factors are all perceptual and they are subjective in nature, but each of them is, as we understand, very, very critical in terms of product adoption. So the first and foremost thing is for a product to gain acceptance, it must have some relative advantage that it can offer to the customer over existing alternatives. So if I'm selling a dishwashing market where manual labor is readily available and inexpensive, it may not work well. Take the example of India. While washing machines have taken predominance in the market, the dishwashing machines still haven't made that kind of impact because manual labor is readily available and relatively inexpensive. The second factor that we need to consider is the compatibility. So, compatibility here is in terms of the local customs and habits. We are localizing a product to suit the local customer in a foreign market. So, a freezer would not find a ready market in Asia because we prefer fresh food. We were just talking about refrigerators, right? So, in Asia, people like to sweep and mop floors daily. So, there is no market for carpet or vacuum cleaners. Even if they are removed, dusted, and put back after the regular mopping and cleaning is done. So we have a different thought process. So the products that we need to introduce into any market has to be localized for that particular market. Then the next one is a new product has an advantage because here we are talking in terms of it being able to divide and test in a small trial basis. And if we find that there is a suitability and benefit to the local market, that is trialability and divisibility, then we may be looking at actually introducing the product. Then we also require an observation of a product in public. How it is accepted. Is there a social acceptance? Is there a reinforcement? That means again and again people want to purchase the product. So, are there any triggers which reinforce that thought process in the customer's mindset? And therefore, that will help in a more rapid adoption and less resistance. One example is like say blue jeans or quartz watches or automobiles. They're used publicly and are highly observable products. The next one is in terms of complexity of a product or difficulty in understanding a product's qualities. It tends to slow down in market acceptance. So the factor that explains why ground coffee has a difficult time in making headway to replace instant coffee in many countries. Similarly, in India, if you see, the reverse happens. We are so used to ground coffee that instant coffee has lesser adoption. So that is where we are trying to differentiate our product based on the local market requirement. The first four variables, as we have seen, they're related to positive adoption process like complexity. Uh, Price is, however, related negatively to product adoption. So, if you were to look at 1982, copiers were too big and expensive. So, there was very, very little adoption unless it was being set up in some public marketplace with a commercialization as a thought process. However, Canon then decided to introduce personal copiers with cartridges that customers could themselves change. And because the price was dropped so much, it became very, very easily adoptable, and more people started purchasing the product. So it started dominating the entire photo xeroxing process. So next, let's go into theory of international product life cycle, that is IPLC. So the international product life cycle theory, which is developed and verified by various economists, uh, fundamentally talks in terms of a comparative advantage. So it describes the diffusion process of an innovation across national boundaries. So if you look at the life cycle, when it begins in a developed countries, it has a new product to satisfy customer needs, but then it wants to exploit the technological breakthrough by selling the same product abroad. Now, other nations which are more advanced may have set up their own production facilities. So, what do less developed countries do? They also similarly follow suit. So, efficiency and comparative advantage shifts from developed countries to developing countries. So, if we were to look in terms of the international product life cycle or IPLC in short, It fundamentally goes through five distinct stages, that is stage 0 through stage 4. So, if you see, look at the diagram. Stage 0 talks about local innovation. So, that is in the home country, where time is depicted as 0 on the left of the vertical importing or exporting axis. So, it represents a regular and highly familiar product life cycle in operation within its original market. Innovations are most likely to occur in highly developed countries because consumers are already affluent to a certain extent in that country and they have relatively unlimited wants. So, from a supply side as well, firms in advanced nations have both technological know how and abundant capital to develop new products. So, from stage 0, which is the first stage, we move to stage 1, which is overseas innovation. So, from moving from a local to an overseas innovation, once the product is well developed, its original market well cultivated, and local demands are more or less adequately supplied, the firm may decide to look at overseas to make a better sales and thereby increase its profit. So, this stage is known as pioneering or international introduction stage. So, while stage 1 is more about the domestic market, that is stage 0, stage 1 talks in terms of overseas innovation. Then stage 2, that is the third step, talks about maturity. So when there is a growing demand in advanced nations, it provides an impetus for firms. What kind of impetus? To commit themselves to stating local production uh, from an operational point of view. So, with the help of their government's protective measures to preserve infant industries, these firms can survive and thrive in spite of relative inefficiency because they have not been in operation long enough or gained the necessary expertise long enough to have more of an efficient mode of operation. Then the fourth stage, that is stage 3, is the worldwide imitation. This means that the product that is being brought out by the innovating nation has a continuous decline in exports. So there's no more a demand anywhere to cultivate. So the decline will inevitably affect the innovating firm's economies of scale and its production costs thus begin to rise again. So, consequently, firms in other advanced nations use their lower prices. So, they couple this with the product differentiation techniques to gain more consumer acceptance, and therefore, it may imply an expense of the innovating firm. And then the final stage is the stage of reversal. So, not only must all good things come to an end, as we know, there's always an end to anything start, but misfortune frequently accompanies the end of a favorable situation. So, what do we mean by this misfortune? It could be that the product doesn't have sufficient standardization, or second, it can be have a comparative disadvantage vis-a-vis competitive countries. It could also be in terms of that product being no longer capital incentive or technology incentive, but it may have become labor intensive. Therefore, it's not effective in terms of costing or pricing to continue to operate in the foreign market. So these are the five stages that we have considered in the product life cycle in IPLC, that is International Product Life Cycle. Moving on, we'll be talking in terms of product standardization versus product adaptation. There is a significant difference between the two. Product standardization means that a product designed originally for a local market is exported to other countries with virtually no change, except perhaps for the translation of words and some cosmetic or minor changes. For example, if we were to look at Revlon, it used to ship successful products abroad without any change in the product formulation. The packing remained the same. In some cases, it didn't even have a local translation. Even advertising was more or less the same that they were using globally, and they were not customizing it to the local market. So, there are certain advantages to both standardization and individualization. So, what are the advantages of standardization? The first and foremost thing is that it makes the whole process very simple and cost effective. It's an easy product. for process for executives to understand and implement. It is also cost effective. So there are a lot of advantages for standardization. However, if only cost is to be considered, then standardization is clearly the most logical choice, because economies of scale can appear only if there are reduced production costs. Yet, minimizing production costs does not necessarily mean that profit increase will follow. Simplicity is not always beneficial. Costs are often confused, as we know, with profits. So that is why it is important that marketing goal is focused on maximizing profit, and production cost reduction should be considered as the secondary and not the primary objective. So the next one is, when appropriate, standardization is definitely a good approach. For example, when a consistent company or product image is needed, product uniformity is maintained. So, if I were to put an old logo and you were to put a new logo as an example for the same company, then obviously with certain consistency is not being maintained. So, the worldwide success of McDonald's is based on its consistent product quality and services. We know that more or less wherever we are in whichever part of the world, McDonald's will serve similar products. It may vary slightly in terms of its ingredients. For example, certain things are not sold in India. However, what is remaining constant or consistent is the product quality and the company services. So, the obsession with product quality necessitates the costly export of French fries from Canada to European franchises, because the required kind of potato is not grown in Europe. Just imagine, just for French fries, they import potatoes all the way from Canada. So, some products, by their very nature, are not or cannot be easily modified. For example, if you talk in terms of musical recordings or work of art, they are examples of products that cannot be easily modified, or they cannot be easily changed. Because if we were to change it, then it would become an entirely different composition altogether. So, with regard to high quality products, both users and manufacturers may find it desirable to reduce confusion and promote compatibility by introducing industry specifications. So, what are these industry specifications? They help to make the standardization possible. So, a condition that may support the production and distribution of standardized products exists when certain products can be associated with particular natural and cultural universals. That is, when consumers from different countries share similar need characteristics and therefore want essentially identical products. Let us take an example of cricket bat. Because it is very very popular in as a game, not only in India but in many countries as well. So if you see in terms of the cricket bat, it has a certain standardization, and that more or less applies to every country that has a professional setup as far as cricketing as a sports is competitive sports is concerned. So watches are also another example where they are standardized and used worldwide. So the arguments for adaptation, that means I have a standardized product, but I am adapting it for the local markets. So while standardized products are highly preferred by customers, we also need to understand that domestic considers this may desire a particular design of a product produced for the American market. So when the watch, for example, if is a very standardized product, however, we may find that there are certain cars, certain colors, there are certain styles which are far more popular in the US than in, say, India. So we may have to give a range of products there of the same product, maybe a variant or many variants, to make it more adaptable to the local customers. Another thing that we can also consider is driving. So while big cars and left-hand drive syndromes are there in among many people, but they describe the US firm's reluctance and unwillingness to modify their products to suit their customers' needs. So here, if you're talking in terms of having a right hand drive, there we are talking in terms of having a left hand drive. So adapting one to the other may be a little contraindicatory. So according to the big car syndrome, US marketers assume that product designed for Americans are always superior and they'll be preferred by foreign consumers naturally. So they don't have to put much of an effort, but automatically consumers prefer something similar. So the US car manufacturers, on the one hand, talk about this, whereas if you see Asia and European countries, they have traffic rules requiring drivers to drive on the left side of the road. So cars with steering on the left presents a serious safety hazard. So while importing cars from the US, we may find that there is a difference in terms of where the wheel is located vis-a-vis where when we are importing from our own country. So accordingly, the product may have to be matched to that particular local market. So mandatory product modification, there are some things which are mandatory and some are optional. So the mandatory factors include government's mandatory standards, that is the company's regulations. You have to strictly follow that when you are entering into a new market. Second one is in terms of electrical current standards like phase, frequency, and voltage. The next one is in terms of measurement standards or imperial system of measurement like feet, pounds, or it could be a metric system like meter, kilogram, etc. The next factor is the product standard and systems. So let us deep dive into each of them in a little more detail. So the optional product modification can happen based on the physical distribution. So here there is a modification attractiveness that is attached to it because of the physical distribution. This involves the facilitation of product transportation at the lowest cost. If freight charges are based on either a weight or a volume basis, we also need to understand that the carrier can charge on the basis of whichever is more profitable to them. So the marketer may not be in a position to bargain and say, I want one over the other. That is, I want to consider weight over volume or vice versa. So the marketer has to reduce delivery costs if the product is assembled and it has to be shipped. So many countries also have factors like narrow roads, doorways, stairs, etc., or even elevators. So that means that they're already restricting customers from entering into that particular market because they are not in a position to buy your big items. They need to buy smaller, more narrowly designed items for that product to be successful in that particular market. The next one is in terms of determinant for conditions, including climate conditions. So, the hot, cold, humid, dry conditions may affect product profitability or performance. Another local use condition that can initiate product changes space constraint. So, when we talk about Sears as a company and look at their refrigerators, they were actually redesigned to be smaller in dimensions without sacrificing the original capacity so that they could fit the compact Japanese boxes. So Philips similarly had to reduce the size of its coffee maker to be made more aware. So, consumer demographics is another factor that needs to be seriously considered. So, this means that physical appearance of not only the model or the child for that matter, but it can also affect how products are used and how suitable those products are. So, if we look at Habitat Mothercare PLC, it is found that many British products are not consistent with American customs and stay sizes. So, nothing surprising about that. However, what we need to understand is its comforters were not long enough to fit American beds. Its tumblers and could not hold enough to avoid uh, a smaller size or bigger size, depending on the local market. So Philips actually had to downsize its shaver because it had to fit into the smaller Japanese hand. And another example is of a US brasserie company. What they did was, when they initially introduced themselves in the West Germany market, they did not do well because German women have a different process where they like to try out the merchandise at a store. So and they did not fail as such until later when the product was ill-fitting us or of measurement without considering variations between American and German customers. So the product may have been refunded or adjustment made against other purchases. So finally, other environmental characteristics related to use conditions should also be examined. So, for example, if you were to look at factors like graphical art products for Japanese professionals, most of them have no dark rooms and they have to work in different light environments. So, this may not be a very, very successful product in those countries. So, the price is another factor which has a high influence on the product success or failure in a particular marketplace. The factor becomes even more crucial abroad because US products need to be expensive. They also try to ensure that customers' incomes or foreign customers' incomes may be lower compared to American incomes. So, to solve this problem, what did Americans do? They decided that American companies can reduce the content of the product or they remove any factors, nonsensical factors that may arise due to this, or they have a toothpaste of both. Now, the next one that we need to consider is the movement of these products across national boundaries. So, here there are factors that may be considered. That is, more international marketers often modify their products in individual markets because they have a desire to maximize their profit. The next point to be considered is perhaps the most arbitrary one actually is product change abroad is because of historical preference or local customs and culture. That means over a period in time, how did the local customs and culture prevail? It could be in terms of product size, color, speed, grade, and source. So all these are considered. Kodak is one great example where it altered its film to cater to a Japanese idea of attractive skin tones. Otherwise, earlier it was looking at, say, an American concept of skin tone, and the perceptions may vastly vary between the consumers of the two countries. So, in conclusion, here we can say that marketers should not waste time resisting product modification. It may be just a part of the process, and the earlier we understand and implement that, the faster will it be for us to not only gain an entry into a foreign market, but also to be able to gain a sizable entry into the foreign market. The next point to be considered are in terms of branding decisions. So, what is the basic purpose of branding? In general, the function of a branding is to A, create identification and brand awareness, B, guarantee a certain level of quality and satisfaction, and three, help with promotions. So as these purposes have the same ultimate goal to introduce repeated sales, so the company may decide to consider in terms of importance of branding as a marketing tool rather than as one of competitive tools. So the next one is a topic that we'll be looking at deeply is branding levels and alternatives. In that, there are four broad levels that we need to look at. First one is no brand versus brand. Second is primary brand versus manufacturer's brand. Third one is single brand versus multiple brands. And fourth one is local brands versus worldwide brands. So let us look at branding versus no brand. So here, the brand or not a brand is the question. Is it a brand or is it not a brand? So most US exported products are always branded. So it does not mean that all products should be, but branding has certain advantages. It is a free course or a cost free proposition where it is based on added expenses. And then it is also in terms of visible in history, in terms of its commodities. So here, when we're talking about commodities, we're talking about things like salt, diamonds, agriculture, chemical products, etc. So commodities are fundamentally unbranded or they're undifferentiated products which are sold by grade and not necessarily by the um, need of including good authors or good subscriptions or good papers. So, as such, there is no uniqueness. So, the great differential that happens here may not be much different from one supplier to another supplier. In the case of a private brand versus manufacturer's brand, branding is primarily created to promote sales and move product necessitates a further branding decision. So, whether the manufacturer uses its own brand or a distributor's brand on its product. So distributors in the world of international business, they include trading companies, importers and retailers among others. So these are called as private brands. Clearly manufacturer has two basic alternatives. What are they? First one and foremost is brand itself. The second one is that it is a private brand. So the choice depends in part on its bargaining power. So if the distributor is prominent and the manufacturer itself is unknown and anxious to penetrate a new market, then they may choose to go with the distributor's brand on the product. But if the manufacturer has superior strength, that means they already come from a position of strength where they may have been well established in the local market, they may force the distributor in turn to accept the brand as part of their product offerings. So, what is a single brand versus multiple brands? So, in a single brand, it is marketed by the manufacturer. So, the brand is assured of receiving full attention for maximum impact. So, a company may choose to market several brands within a small market. This may be based on the assumption the market is homogeneous and the the fall off of that is the product must be segmented. So if you look at HUL, it has Wheel, Surf Excel, Sunsilk, Lifebuoy, Vim, etc. That means it has within its own umbrella multiple brands. So consequently, a specific brand is designed for a specific market segment. So multiple brands are suitable when a company wants to trade either up or down because both moves have a tendency to hurt the firm's main business. So, do I want to trade higher or trade lower? So, if a company has the reputation for quality, trading down without creating a new brand will hurt the prestige of the existing brand. Whereas in the case of the second example that we have seen, if a company is known for its low priced mass um, uh, produced products, trading up without creating a new brand is hampered by the image of the existing products and the kind of use that they are being put into. So they are being used by, say, some locals who are kind of redefining the specific area. So, the next third factor that we need to consider is local brands versus worldwide brands. So, here, when we put out a product in its own market, the problem does not end there. In terms of the manufacturer, what we need to see is the possibility of having to modify the trademark. The next factor is in terms of which factors are allowing the company to have only one brand name, which can be easily identified, or multiple brand names, which will allow the company more flexibility to enter into a worldwide market with a bigger range of products. So, if a single worldwide brand is existing, it is also known as international, universal, or global brand. For a brand to be global or truly worldwide, it must, however, have a commonly understood set of characteristics and benefits in all of the markets, whether it is marketed there or not. So, Coca Cola is a great example of a global brand in the sense that it has been successful in maintaining similar properties across different countries and cultures. So, we'll move to the next topic, that is brand consolidation. So, frequently it is either by accident or a lack of awareness, where despite the advantages being offered by the almighty brand strategy, which spans across multiple factors, it may be desirable to actually consolidate enough multiple brands under one brand. So it is like a home brand or umbrella brand under which there are multiple brands. So the number of tables reach the point of being cumbersome or confusing. So national rank American card, what they do? They try to issue cards around the world a vast number of times. And so here, if you see factors like Unilever, what do they do? What we are very familiar with is the wide range of products that they offer, whether it's in beauty or home care or food products, just to name a few. So some of its well-known brands include, for example, ice cream, Breyer's Good Homer, soap, that is Dove, Caras and Lindu, hair care, that is Soft, Thermasilk, etc. So, the most important thing here we are saying is that this portfolio of 1600 brands that the company enjoys is well recognized. However, it is has proven to be unmanageable because it provides a certain amount of confusion not only in the company products itself, but also from a consumer's point of view. So the what did Unilever do? They decided to focus mainly on some 400 brands. So that means that they have effectively eliminated or neglected 75% of their products. So another way of consolidation of brands is by dropping the weaker brands because they are not going to be anyway successful in a foreign market. So, if you look in terms of brand origin and selection, there can be a number of sources that may be applicable. The first and foremost is in terms of the firm's founders as well. So, what founders like Francois, for example. So, Michel, Albert G. Spalding, Pierre Cardin, and Yves Saint Laurent. If you see in terms of places like Bhubaneswar, letter and numbers, for example, IBM, they coined words. What are these words? IKEA, based on a conference at the initials of the Swedish born fighter, reign in uh, uh, the coined the words like, for example, based on the Swedish born founder. So in war camp Pratt. So from that they derived the word IKEA. So the farm has something like Elm Tart, a little difficult to pronounce, and the village is known as Aguignard. So where he grew up. So sometimes it's easy to purchase a brand that is existing from another company. So brand selection is not an exact science, whereas in many successful cases of well introduced and well launched brands like Gabriel Channel, for example, like the scent of the fifth sample bottle in 1921. And feeling that 5 was a pretty number, she named the perfume Channel number 5. As simple as that. So, and this has become one of the most well selling products of the Channel perfume range. Whereas, if you see in terms of Denmark's Lego group, they're known for their interlocking plastic bricks. All of us have at some time played or toyed with these Lego bricks. So, it is the fifth largest toy manufacturer in the world, and they have an annual sale of about $1 billion, which is huge. The founder, Olkirk Christiansen, they named the company Lego, which is a combination of the Danish words let God, meaning play well. Let God meaning play well, and that's how Lego came into existence. So, more recently, brand selection has shifted away from being an art and it has become more of a science. There are several companies that specialize in creating brands and corporate names, and they use computer programs that can run prefixes, suffixes, and other word combinations. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that marketers do not have the luxury of picking and choosing names they like. Nor is it always feasible because it has to be more of a name that is not only accepted locally in a foreign market, but it is also well recognized and well recalled. So, brand characteristics. So, what are they? So, a good brand name should possess certain characteristics. And these characteristics are thoroughly discussed in more details in advertising and marketing textbooks. However, to broadly understand what is a brand and how it should be, first and foremost, we'd say that it should be short, distinctive, easy to pronounce, and able to suggest product benefits without any negative connotations or implications. So, in the international arena, these qualities are also relevant. So, in selecting a brand name, a marketer should first find out whether a brand name has any negative connotation or not in the target market. And then, based on that, they may decide that it may be inappropriate or incorrect to introduce a product in a particular market. So, if we were to look at Japan's Daihatsu Motor Company Limited, they did not succeed as well in the US market. And fundamentally, this was because of its name, hard to pronounce for someone who's not a Japanese by origin. So, according to research, many American consumers, though they thought the company was Korean and it has a negative connotation, they decided not to go with that particular product. So, an international brand name should reflect fundamentally the desired product image. So, this is where we are talking in terms of consumer perception. So, the consumers, for example, worldwide think that French perfumes are far superior to the rest of the world. So, they may like that actually, in this case, a French sounding names rather than something which is more commonplace. Next one, we'll be talking about brand protection. The job of brand protection cannot be considered done just because a name has been chosen. It has to be protected. So that means by protection, we mean that there has to be a trademark registration. And because of the cost involved, many may not decide to trademark their product, especially in places where demand seems weak. However, in major markets, they cannot neglect trademarking this product where there is a stiff competition that takes place. The Paris Convention, which is also more popularly named, but originally the name was International Convention for the Protection of Industrial Property. So, this is the most significant multilateral agreement on trademark rights that was introduced because of its capacity to establish reciprocity. That means it allows a foreign trademark owner to obtain the same protection in other convention member countries as well. So whether they trademark in their home country or in a member country, their company per se has its similar or same rights over its trademark. So although preventing discrimination against non-nationals, the degree of protection may vary with individual national laws. So, for example, the Trademark Registration Treaty, which is all more popularly known as TRT, it allows a company to file for trademark protection with the International Bureau of the World Intellectual Property Organization, that is WIPO in short, without being required, as in the case of the Madrid Agreement, to have a prior home registration. So WIPO says that even if your product doesn't have a prior product registration in your home country, you can still go ahead and trademark it in another country where you wish to operate. So, other treaties that are very popular and considered are the Arrangement of Nice that was held in France, the African Intellectual Property Organization, that is OAPI. So, if you see the arrangement of NICE in France, it considered the international classification of what the goods and services to which trademarks may apply. So, based on that, they try to implement certain characteristics into the trademarking of certain products. So the courts have also developed a hierarchy of registration eligibility. So moving from highly protectable to non-protectable, these categories are fanciful, for example, Kotak, arbitrary, example, Camel, suggestive, that is ever ready batteries, descriptive as in ivory, and generic as in aspirin tablets. So, for a trademark to be eligible for registration, it must first and foremost be distinctive in nature, or it must at least have the capability of being distinctive from other products of a similar kind. So, a fanciful market or a fanciful mark is a term coined solely for the purpose of identifying a particular product. An arbitrary mark, however, is an ordinary word that is used on a product in a totally non descriptive way. So, you need to understand the difference between fanciful mark and arbitrary mark. There is also a suggestive mark. What does it do? It subtly indicates something about a product and consumers, and thus uses their imagination to understand the mark represents a product's characteristic. Another variation of this is a descriptive mark, which in contrast immediately conveys, without requiring use of imagination. It is out there, it is very clear. It highlights a product's characteristic, quality, or feature for wide acceptance and understanding. Interestingly, pharmaceutical companies are quite good at creating fanciful marks which imply a product's benefits because they cannot describe the fact of the product. So that is why they have to choose other means of protecting and introducing their product or promoting their product. A suggestive mark is registrable. So that needs to be understood. Whereas a descriptive name is not legally acceptable unless it has certain distinctiveness through long contained exclusive use. So, even if the descriptive mark might somehow have been registered, the mark can still be cancelled for lack of distinctiveness. That is why we are been repeatedly saying that the product has to be distinctive in nature. So, weedless, for example, as a lawn care product may be either suggestive or descriptive. When we look at a generic term, it nearly identifies the product rather than the maker of the product. So whenever we say generic, it means the product itself. For example, when I say washing machine, it is just a generic term. Whereas if I say IFP washing machine, then I'm identifying IFP as the maker of that particular product. So most countries do not require the display of a trademark in a specific language or the translation of that trademark. However, to be registered, it has to have an equivalent pronunciation which is easily acceptable and trademarked. So, for example, China requires a trademark to be displayed in Chinese characters. So, Coca Cola, what did it do? Based on a group of Chinese characters it has used, it may have the right sound but the wrong interpretation. So, if you see the original characters they used, means had a very weird interpretation. It meant wax, fat, and mare, which has nothing to do with that of a Coca Cola. But finally, when they kind of played around with the new characters, it came to a translation which meant may the happy mouth rejoice. So here, certain customization is required based on the local trademark rules that may apply in that home versus host country where we are expanding our business. So, unlike patents, trademark registration can be also renewed indefinitely. So, this is very, very important. Then, when we talk in terms of packaging and the functions and criteria, much like the brand name, packaging is another integral part of the product. So, for most products, for example, when we buy detergents in large packages, the detergent suppliers found it necessary to use plastic bags for small packages, but it would find cardboard would be too expensive for the purpose. So, accordingly, the product has to be modified. So, if we see in terms of the products that are being sold, we see that some are being sold in tin boxes versus glass boxes versus sachets versus paper bags, etc. So it depends on not only the packaging per se and the cost factor attached to it, but it also needs to be understood that packaging is dependent on the perishability of the product, how soon will the product perish, and accordingly the product packaging is selected. It also depends on the end consumer. For example, Japanese prefer beautiful packaging. So Avon had to upgrade its inexpensive plastic packaging to crystalline glass. However, when you do that, of course, we also understand that the pricing may change. So the mandatory package modification is required in several countries. For example, bilinguality, that is French and English, are to be used in Canada, whereas in Belgium, French and Flemish are used in the packaging for making it easier for local consumers to understand what the packaging represents. So, when we talk in terms of packaging, we also need to understand labeling because both are closely intertwined. So packaging requires packages may describe the content, quantity, manufacturer's name and address, and it has also in terms of the designated sizes. It may also have some pictorial illustration that should not be misleading. For example, in Singapore, certain foods must be labeled to conform to defined standards. Today, if we are looking in terms of packaging, we also see that green or red markers or tickers which will identify whether it is a vegetarian or non-vegetarian product or a vegan product for that matter. So, optional package modification is required in certain countries. For example, Hindustan Lever, when it began selling single use sachets of Sunsilk shampoo for 2 to 4 cents, the mini packages now account for half of Hindustan Lever's $2.4 billion in sale in India. So, imagine how a small introduction or variation made such a big contribution to the company's deep pockets. So Unilever's Rexona, for example, the brand deodorant stick, it sells for about 16 cents and upwards. But when it became very popular in India, it also started spreading to countries like Philippines, Bolivia, Peru, etc. If you see the Vaseline package, it's a very, very small thing. It can be like a tube as well, but it allows for multiple uses. Close up toothpaste, a small tube of close up toothpaste allows for multiple uses. It's not like a one time use and throw. So the role of pricing is also a very, very integral part of a product. A product cannot exist without a price because if a product does not have a price, it cannot be sold. What we also need to ascertain is what is a high or a low price. For example, some countries may prefer the same product to be sold at a higher price because it offers or indicates a certain exclusivity or premium attachment to it. Whereas in certain countries, the same product may have to be lowered, maybe with some product variations, so that it is more affordable for the local market. Ultimately, a price has to be indicative of what the customer is paying for. Price standardization is also applicable. For example, European Union has a lot of options for a free movement of goods. They have eliminated things like custom barriers, harmonization of VAT rates, etc. But at the same time, they also observe the price of the same product in neighboring countries. So there has to be a certain internationally recognized consumer goods with similar pricing or a uniform pricing system applied across the European distribution market. So pricing decisions could be in terms of multifold. So pricing of P for that matter, is one of the four factors of the marketing mix. But when we talk in terms of pricing, there are two things that we need to consider. For example, is it cost plus or imitative pricing? That is, I'm taking my cost as a base factor and I'm attaching a premium over it to make sure that I'm getting some revenue out of it. Or is it imitative pricing? I'm looking at my competitors and then pricing accordingly. So pricing has to consider several other factors. It has to consider factors like exchange rate, tariffs, culture, etc. So another thing is important that we need to consider is the supply and demand. So, if based on the supply and demand, my product cost may go up or down. So, costing may be affected in terms of, say, things like you look at business travel. It's a great example where, when you're closer to the travel date, the prices go up, and in the last minute, there may be actually a drop in the price because there are no takers for that particular airline at that point in time, and seats are going vacant. So the airline decides to drop the prices. Then it also needs to be considered in terms of elasticity and cross elasticity of demand. So the price has to be flexible. So it cannot be fixed or rigid in that sense. Then there is an exchange rate. How will my product sell in my country vis-a-vis how much will it sell in a foreign country where there may be a weaker currency? So take India and US for example. That may be indicative in terms of the exchange rate of say $1 to Indian rupees. What is the probable exchange rate? Market share. If I'm entering into a market, what kind of market am I looking at? How big is this market going to be? What is the size in terms of both revenue and numbers that I can get? The tariffs and distribution costs. These are also considered in terms of the costing or pricing of the product. If there are more middlemen that is agents or wholesalers or retailers or others who are actually helping to move the goods onwards, the tariffs and distribution costs may actually go up. Whereas if a company were to sell it directly, they may have to have lesser costs because they are not involving many middle agents. So culture is also important. So if we were to consider a practice that is common in USA, for example, they what they do is they charge all buyers the same price under similar buying conditions. So it becomes a lot easier to ensure that the prices standardized. However, if we were to look in certain countries like say India, while the MRP is fixed, there could be some flexibility in terms of a flexible or negotiated price. Haggling is a very common art that we see not only in India but many East Asian or Southeast Asian countries and many other countries like Africa and other countries as well. So there has to be always an alternative pricing strategy that needs to be considered in terms of how it is done over the years. And finally, we'll also be looking at dumping. What is dumping? Where there is a price discrimination, that is the practice of charging different prices for the same product in similar markets. This is an outcome of imported goods that are sold at prices which are so low that they're actually detrimental to the local producers of the same kind of merchandise. For example, if we look at Boeing, they accused Airbus of receiving $9 billion in subsidies from the government consortium. So, what did Boeing do? They were actually able to offer their airplanes at close to 15 to 20 million less than the true cost. So this is what we mean by dumping. Dumping also applies to services, so like banks, for example. So dumping can take many forms. They can be sporadic, predatory, persistent, and reverse. Sporadic dumping means it happens once in a while. It is just as a one-time off. You want to get rid of certain distressed or excess merchandise. The second one is in terms of predatory. Predatory dumping is more permanent. So here, what the company is trying to do is it's trying to sell at a loss to gain access to market and to drive out competition. The third one is in terms of persistent. That means it is applicable over a long period in time. It is not a one-time thing, but it's a long term. And the next one is in terms of reverse. Reverse dumping is where you introduce dumping for a certain period of time, but then over a period you actually reverse the dumping process. There's also a price distortion. So dumping loans are not only for cause of or occurrence because of price variations. The power of the market force in setting prices can be moderated by whom? By government's price policy. So some governments allow dumping to take place, and they allow the manufacturer or supplier to make set their own prices. But in many governments in many advanced nations, they have very stringent rules in terms of price distortion. So transfer pricing is also another common practice where MNCs, for example, they may have many subsidiaries. So what do? They trade among themselves or with the parent firm. So almost one third of all US exports go to US subsidiaries and business affiliates overseas. So they are selling to their own subsidiaries, and there is that internal trading that is going on in terms of the products. So there are four basic methods used to determine transfer prices. The first method involves direct transfer of at a direct manufacturing cost. The second one is having a small markup. That means direct manufacturing cost and a small predetermined markup. The third one is market based transfer price. What is the market like? And then we have an arm's length price. That means determining the transfer price. You need to understand unaffiliated traders who would agree on a particular transaction. Then we look in terms of counter trade. Counter trade is one of the oldest forms of trade. Here, the government mandate is to pay for goods and services with something other than cash. So, I'm giving something to one country and I'm getting back some other goods in exchange. So, counter trade has a wide range of products within its kitty. So the monetary payments may or may not be part of the deal. So I may be giving one, I may be supplying rice to one country and getting back, or paddy to one country and getting back wheat in as a an exchange or a counter trade. So counter trade provides a retail financing alternative to countries which may have some debt and liquidity problems. It also may be something that works well in new markets or in terms of the bilateral trade agreements that occur between various governments. So the advantages of counter trade is primarily around three factors, that is market access, foreign exchange and pricing. It also has certain considerations, for example, tax advantage. So if I'm able to sell my product at full price and then I can convert the inventory to an account receivable.